This is the Launch Station, the only place you need to look for all things onboarding, implementation, and customer success. Tune in for insights from industry experts every week.
Welcome, everyone. We are here for another episode of the Launch Station Season 2. Today, our guest is Sloan Pettersen. She's the Director of Global Client Onboarding at Impact. She's done a variety of roles, studied international business administration, before spending time starting her journey with Impact and getting their customers set up, getting them to value in a timely manner, eventually leading the formal customer onboarding function. And today we're going to chat more about how she helped automation and scale come into the picture at Impact's onboarding, starting all the way from doing things high touch to getting the organization ready for an onslaught of new customers coming into the fold. Thank you, Sloan, for doing this with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Perfect. So, you're a Santa Barbara native, but you mentioned you have a keen interest in snowboarding. How did that come about?
Yes. Growing up at the beach, it does seem a little odd that I would love to snowboard, but about 25 years ago, my dad and my family is all a bunch of surfers. So snowboarding was really kind of coming about, and these surfer guys now were curious about snowboarding. So my dad went up and tried it out, and he loved it. So, he brought our family up there, and we all started spending time in the mountains and learning to snowboard, and kind of having like our holiday trips and winter trips would all be to the mountains to go snowboarding and skiing. So that's kind of where that came from, and I still love to do it today. So definitely one of my favorite trip getaways.
Awesome. So obvious next question: beaches or mountains?
Beaches or mountains? Oh, that's a tough one. But yeah, I think I'm definitely a beach girl through and through. I love to live by the beach. That's kind of a necessary component to where I'm going to live. And part of the reason I have yet to leave Santa Barbara for an extended period of time, other than traveling, but pretty much lived in Santa Barbara most of my life, and probably will be here for the foreseeable future. So if I had to choose, it would be beaches.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your journey with Impact. How did you get associated with the company, and what's the journey been so far?
Yeah. So I actually started Impact a little over 10 years ago. I took a little hiatus there to travel after I'd been there for a few years. And then I returned, and I've been back now for about 6 years again. So I've watched Impact.com grow from 23 employees to over 1,000 worldwide now. And I've really seen our product transform partnerships across thousands of brands and partners. And so when I first started here, I was the sole activation coordinator, as we called it at that time, and our only support representative. So I was responsible for setting up all new customers, as well as manning our support desk and chats. And I've held a few different roles in my journey here, but all of them have been like on the customer service and experience side, specifically involving the onboarding process.
Great. Can you also tell us a little bit about impact.com so the audience can have some context on what the business actually does?
Yeah, definitely. So impact.com is one of the leading platforms in partnership automation. We enable enterprises to manage, optimize, and grow all of their partnerships in one place. We work with all types of different brands, from like retailers, travel vertical, financial vertical, to partner them with all kinds of different partnerships as well. So one of like main ones was like affiliates back in the day. Today, we're seeing a lot of like influencer type of partnerships. There's also B2B partnerships, and lead gen, all kinds of different types of brands and enterprises that we just want to facilitate and automate their partnerships. So we do that through tracking, so we can track all types of different events that you may want to pay out a partner on. We automate all of the payments to partners. We provide reporting and insights, so that you can really optimize your programs and see how this partnership channel, kind of how it falls into the rest of your marketing efforts.
Got it. When would you consider a company, a customer truly activated on your platform? Because you used the term activation coordinator at one point. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So we would consider them activated once they have completed their setup. So I would say we consider them a customer as soon as they've been sold by sales and they're passed off to our onboarding and integrations team. And then I would say we consider them activated once they've completed that setup, they've completed their technical integration, and they can utilize the system for what it's meant for. That's when I would say they're activated.
Got it. And does it require the customers, partners to also be on board in some way, or that's sort of transparent to the partner side of the house?
So I would say that's kind of the first point of value, is as soon as they have their first partnership joined on impact.com, that's when they have realized the value of our platform. But in order to get there, yes, they have to get through the onboarding account setup as well as the technical implementation. So we definitely want to see that through, and that they're able to successfully create a program that is attractive to partners so that they're going to want to join, and making sure that they have the tools and educational material at their hands to know, like, what are the first steps now? Now that I've completed the setup, what do I do to ensure that I can get partners to join? And what does that recruiting and discovery process look like, to actually start to realize the value that I can get from this platform that I've just spent time setting up?
Got it. Impact's obviously grown a fair bit since the early days when you were like one among 23 people. You folks have also acquired a bunch of companies. Scaling teams is one thing, but you also have to accommodate changes based on those acquisitions into your onboarding process. So tell us about what that journey has been like.
Yeah, it has been quite a journey indeed. And to be honest, some of the challenges and changes that we've had have been more difficult to overcome than others. So not only have we had to account for growing volume, but we've had to incorporate additional products, additional teams and processes as well. So one thing I always try to do when addressing change is to ensure I'm looking at things through the customer's experience, looking at it through that lens. It's so important to the overall customer happiness, to be sure that any of our internal challenges or changes that we are dealing with don't seep over into the customer and their experience with impact.com. So one interesting shift we saw happen in 2020, as the pandemic was hitting, I guess, we saw a massive increase in our SMB volume of customers joining impact.com. Historically, we'd had a pretty good array of mid-tier and large enterprises and a healthy amount of smaller brands coming on board. But with the COVID pandemic in play, a lot of brands were looking to how they could shift activities online, and consumers were all moving online, without being able to purchase in store. So all of a sudden, we saw a lot of these smaller brands who were new to the partnership concept, wanting to jump in and kind of realize the value that this channel can provide. So with that, we really had to iterate a lot of our processes to handle this influx of volume, and figure out how we could cater to their needs with our same limited number of resources. And one thing too, with a lot of these customers that were coming in that maybe were new to the space, they needed more like consultative advice and more of that educational component and training, so that they could strategize and understand like what do I need to do to ensure that this is going to be a successful program. What can I do to make sure this is attractive to partners? How do I get partners to want to work with me? So this is when we really kind of had to start capitalizing on automation and figure out how we could, bring in tools, resources, to better utilize like one-to-many engagements, instead of that one-on-one engagement with the customer all the time. We had to figure out, okay, how do we ensure that we're still providing them a positive experience, but not necessarily hand-holding them and, giving them like a dedicated resource throughout the whole journey. What can we do to kind of take a step back and layer in some automation and help us grow, and account for like all of this growth that we are getting as an organization.
Got it. That leaves me with a lot of questions to follow up on, actually. Firstly, you mentioned there were a lot of new SMB customers that started coming into the fold. Since business was growing, was there not a temptation to throw more people at the problem? How did you decide, no, we're going to try to handle this with the same number of resources?
So I think it was just difficult given like the economic situation. So obviously, like we were all being affected by the COVID pandemic, and having to switch to operating as remote teams. And we weren't hiring. We were on hiring freeze at that point as well. We didn't know what was going to happen. We also were aware that a lot of our existing customers would also be faced with these similar economic challenges. And we would probably see some churn from some of the customers that couldn't make it through some of the challenges that we were facing as a world. There was kind of no choice. Like we didn't have the choice to continue to throw people at the problem. And we actually were also at a point where we were already kind of taking the steps to figure out how to automate this more. In the competitive landscape, we were seeing a lot of our competitors like offering lower pricing and kind of getting into that competitive piece. We had to be able to compete, but still ensure that we could get people on board and provide them with a positive experience. And one of the only ways to do that is to make sure that we have, either like platform guides or tools or intuitive interface that guides people through, without requiring a person to lead them through a whole process. Like what little triggers and levers could we pull so that we're still giving them what they need to succeed, but maybe not using up as much time from our teams. So trying to figure out how we become more efficient. How do we ensure that our engagements with the customer become more value adding, and figuring out what we can automate that isn't going to, cause a huge change in that like perceived customer experience and what they get when, they sign up with Impact.
Got it. And you mentioned also this strange situation where there are a lot more customers coming in. They are
Mhm.
small customers, and yet they need the sort of consultative approach, given they're new to this kind of solution. So,
Yeah.
how did you go about tackling this? You mentioned platforms and tools. Can you sort of walk us through what onboarding was like at Impact before, and then what are like the top changes you did?
Basically, we've kind of always done what we need to do to get a customer on board. Um, we, we will make sure that we go above and beyond where we need to make sure that they have what they need. Um, there's a few things that we've done to try to help us better, like scale, become more efficient. And some of this is product related. So I've worked closely with our product team to figure out how we can make some changes in the interface to make it an intuitive flow for the customer to go through. So one like huge project what we've been working on is having like a checklist that is in the app that they can work through that gives them updates and kind of lets them know what are the steps that I need to complete before I am on board and can start adding partners. Um, and then another piece is we've also been working on technical partnerships of our own. So we have partnered with some of like the top shopping engines and e-commerce sites and have built out plugins with them. So we have plugins with Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, and that has allowed us to really simplify the technical integration for customers that are already on these e-commerce sites. So they can basically just come in and set up their plugin. We hook in with their shopping engine, and we're able to track pretty easily and seamlessly there. So that's been a huge piece that has brought us like a lot of ability to tackle these smaller customers, make sure like the technical integration isn't too complex for them to be able to handle. And that's usually the piece that takes the most time in setting things up. So it's allowed us to really reduce that time it takes to onboard a customer.
Got it. And you know, obviously, as you're growing as a company, you have like a whole spectrum of types of customers now. You have
Mhm.
small ones, you have big ones, you have ones that need to move at different velocities.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you picked up quite early in terms of how you define success criteria for companies of different sizes?
Yeah. Um, and that can be tough. It's tough to have just like, these are our blanket metrics or our blanket KPIs that apply to everybody. But the onboarding phase is such a critical time in the customer life cycle. It's really when their first experience as a customer with your company begins, and it sets the stage for the rest of their journey, continued through customer success and support and all other teams that are going to be touching that customer further down in their life cycle. You're kind of like their first impression in that onboarding phase. So really understanding your customer's business, listening to their goals, that's essential to ensure that you're able to tie back what success actually will mean to them. So, to your own company, to impact.com, we might be looking at time to launch. And that's a metric that we track and that gets surfaced to all of our leadership. But maybe you have a customer that they don't care about the time to launch. They have time. They want to take their time to make sure that they are learning the product, the platform, the industry. And like that's what's important to them. You may have other customers, like we have a lot of customers that, maybe migrating from another platform onto impact.com. So they have an existing program already, they're already all set up over there. What's going to be important to them is ensuring that when they transition over to Impact, that there's not a massive drop in revenue, that their partners are able to easily transition over, and that the migration is successful. So that piece kind of goes beyond just like the general account setup and the technical integration, but that's what they're going to be using to kind of identify as like, this was a successful move to impact.com, or this was not. I think it just definitely depends on ensuring that you know your customer, you set your expectations with them up front, and that everyone is clear on what goals, deliverables, the timeline, what roles each person holds. Making sure that that's all clear up front is really critical to ensuring the success of the project, and ultimately, the relationship and partnership that you have with your customer as they come on board.
That makes sense. I'm also curious in terms of the team itself, right? Like you're a much larger company now, but how has the onboarding team evolved? Are there different kinds of roles within your organization? Uh, you know, SMEs, etc., or is it all like one kind of profile on the team?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's something we have evolved and changed over the years as well. So on my team today, we have onboarding success managers. So we partner very closely with another team, which has our implementation engineers on it. So my team is primarily responsible for the account setup, ensuring that we get them launched on time. They're kind of the project manager, but also responsible for the happiness and success, kind of owning that relationship with the customer during the onboarding phase. And then the implementation engineer partners closely with my team, and they're responsible for the technical implementation, and they work really closely with like the developer on the client side. So they will be working with them to make sure everything gets integrated, everything gets tested and validated correctly, any troubleshooting needs. They kind of own that technical component. So that's the structure of our team right now, which has been working really well. In the past, I had broken out my team into onboarding project managers and onboarding success managers, and kind of having those as separate roles. We've tried, having like an associate level where they help do some of like the background things that need to happen that are more like task related. But yeah, I think we'll continue to evolve that, especially over the next 6 months, year, as we continue to layer in more automation and start to be able to have some like proactive monitoring of our customers, and looking at their progress without having to go in and maybe update a project plan or go into their account and see what they've completed and what they haven't completed. If we have triggers and things that we're able to see where they're at, then we're able to respond to that, and to address their questions as they come up, instead of always like outreaching and sending progress updates. We can find automation there through systems and tools and automated triggers. So that's something that I see continuing to change, and just figuring out like, I don't think like onboarding will never go away here. We will just learn to become more efficient, and our function may continue to change and evolve as our processes and tools become, smarter, basically.
Got it. And that leads me to one more question. has this ratio of number of accounts per onboarding success manager changed over the years as you've gone through these transitions and what the role does?
Yeah, definitely. I've also kind of had my team broken out by different customer segments. So I have a team that is focused more on SMB, and then I have a team that is focused more on enterprise. So for my enterprise team, the volume of accounts they hold is much lower than my SMB team. And that's typically because the enterprise projects are more complex. There's usually more players involved. The technical integration can be a lot more complex as well. They'll typically have a massive migration or something that we also need to see through. And for SMB, it's usually simpler projects, shorter timelines. And so it's easier to kind of get those customers through the onboarding phase. So that team can handle more volume than say my enterprise team can. And then I think just, as we make these improvements in our processes, in our tools, in our product itself, that's just increasing our efficiencies as a team as well. And it's not all just customer facing improvements, but things that we update on our back end, things like, billing changes and contractual changes that need to happen. Just improving those processes can also save time, so that, we are able to spend more time interfacing with our customers, or like when we do, we're ensuring that there's actual value happening there, and it's not we're not taking our time with the customer to basically do something that could be a help guide or a document or a webinar that they could join or a training video that they could watch.
Is there like a target you look at every year saying, hey, this is the kind of efficiency we want to build on the SMB front? We want each onboarding success manager to be able to get to this kind of a ratio. And you mentioned webinars, you mentioned one-to-many in the past. Is that like a very active thing you're pursuing?
Yes. So we recently launched, probably within the last year or so, something called the Partnership Experience Academy. So PXA. And that's where a lot of our training is getting built from. So we have all kinds of different courses on there around, anything from basic industry trainings to very specific product trainings. And so we're really working to build that out and layer that into our trainings that we do with customers today. We also, I kind of mentioned these checklists that my product team has been building out. So, once we have some metrics around what is the percentage of customers that are launching within this time frame that are going through these new checklist flows. So we want to see reduced time for those customers that are almost doing it like a self-serve option. So they may not be going through our typical process where it comes from sales and gets passed off to a member of my team and is kind of handheld and seen through the process. These customers may still come from sales, but go into the account setup flow and follow through the guides and, the email prompts and everything that is sent their way. And then we basically are supporting them more through reactive chat and ticketing through our support desk. So I think that's where we will start to see the SMB really be able to be set up for scale. And, hopefully then just continuing to drive down the time that it takes to onboard, because ultimately the time it takes to onboard is then going to directly, reflect how long it takes till they can realize value on our platform and actually start finding partnerships or setting up those partnerships that they may already have existing, that they just need to get tracking and, using our automation for.
Got it. We move to the next section of our podcast. So a couple of quick rapid fire questions here. What's a habit you picked up in 2022 that you will continue and you want to continue in 2023?
This is the first thing that came to my mind. But this is one of my daily habits now is doing the Wordle of the day on the New York Times. So I'm in all these different Wordle groups with a bunch of different friends. And I think that's kind of my daily habit that I really enjoy, and I like to make sure I do it every day. And I will surely be continuing that into the new year.
Awesome. I think we share a common habit there. What's one book that you would recommend?
On the personal side, this is just newest to my mind, but Where the Crawdads Sing, I read that, and I just watched the movie recently, and I think that was just such a unique story. I really enjoyed that. And then on the professional side, anything by Patrick Lencioni. I'm not sure if that's how you say his last name, but I think it is. But he's written some great books, like around the ideal team player. And I encourage, like, we've had my team read that in the past, and he has some really good insights into how to work together as a team and kind of ensure that we're set up for success.
Awesome. We have one question from our, audience, our network on Pre-Flight, our community. Now that you have hindsight of how things have panned out, what would you do differently if you had to start the onboarding function at Impact all over again?
I think if anything, I would have almost gone back and ensured that we were trying to use more automation from the beginning. And when I say automation, that could be in so many different ways and shapes and forms that you can automate different things. We, over the years, we've battled with using different project tracking tools, and never really found the perfect fit there. So we would use we've gone from using Salesforce, Jira, Smart Sheets, Google Sheets, a whole variety of different tools to kind of track, for us to track the customer through the onboarding process internally, as well as providing project plans that were these massive Google Sheets with all of these tasks for customers to do. When really what we're ultimately trying to achieve in the onboarding phase is we want that customer logged in to impact.com and completing what they need to complete in the app. So if we, could have gone back and made that stuff surface to them within the interface sooner, I think that would have, just made for an easier process, not having to manage all of these different sheets and tools and things, and just made it really clear for the customer to know, okay, I log into impact.com, I know exactly what I need to do. I don't have to go back and reference all of these different sheets and log into different tools to find what I need to do to get through this onboarding project.
Perfect. We're down to the last question of our episode. Okay. What's one piece of advice you have for a leader who's going through a similar motion of scaling rapidly?
It can be really difficult when you're faced with the challenges of scaling and finding ways to automate, especially when you start to consider some of these other factors that can come into play. So for me, like my true north, and always what brings me back to my purpose is focusing on the customer experience. So like you may have all these cool ideas of how you can automate. Maybe it is by sending emails or these in-app pop-ups or these help documents and videos that you can point them to. But just be sure to take that step back and think about how the customer will experience all of it holistically. So you just want to make sure that you're not like flooding them with a ton of emails all of a sudden. You want to also make sure that like you're discussing with any of your other internal teams that might be sending out communication to the customer so that you're not like duplicating efforts or they don't receive 5 emails from Impact in one day. So just ensuring that like you're getting the right content into their fingertips without being like overly intrusive on, their daily routines. And then aside from that, like it can feel like a lot to tackle all at once. So just, take it in pieces. If you can focus on one segment of customers or one area of, the onboarding process, you can kind of address that first, and then you can continue to iterate and expand on it from there.
Great. Thank you so much, Sloan, for sharing all your inputs and advice and ideas. And thanks for joining us on the show today.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. That was a pleasure to get to talk today.